Evolution of Lizard. The Lizard's first screen appearance was in the Spider-Man animated series from 1967. Here, he was depicted as a large, green, dinosaur-like creature, with a simple design and limited animation. This early version of the Lizard was basic, largely due to the animation limitations of the time. Yet, his introduction here laid the groundwork for his role as a tragic villain, a scientist whose experiments on himself went horribly wrong. Though the 1967 show had a straightforward plot, it touched on Connor's inner conflict. The Spider-Man animated series of 1981 brought back the Lizard with some updates in his design and animation. He still had the classic green skin and long tail, but now, the animation quality allowed for slightly more dynamic action scenes. This series maintained the traditional portrayal of the Lizard as a monstrous figure who threatens Spider-Man, but it didn't dive deeply into Curt Connor's character. In this version, the Lizard is still a clear-cut villain, lacking the complexities that would later define him. He served as a formidable opponent, but without the moral and emotional depth that later portrayals would explore. Nevertheless, this version helped solidify the Lizard as a recurring member of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. In Spider-Man, the animated series from 1994, we see a more nuanced and developed version of the Lizard. This series did an excellent job of exploring Dr. Curt Connor's backstory, presenting him as a devoted scientist, husband, and father. The show highlights his struggle with losing his arm, which ultimately leads him to experiment with lizard DNA in a desperate attempt to regenerate it. This adaptation gave us one of the most complex portrayals of the Lizard at the time. Connor's transformation into the Lizard was portrayed as both frightening and tragic. His design was more monstrous and animalistic, complete with claws, fangs, and a wild personality that contrasted sharply with his human form. This series succeeded in showing the duality of Connor's character, the man who wanted to heal, and the beast he became in his pursuit of science. In 2003, Spider-Man the New Animated Series introduced the Lizard with a darker, edgier tone. This version of the character was less focused on the tragedy of Curt Connors and more on the horror of his transformation. The design took on a grittier, more realistic style, which fit the series' overall mature and shadowy aesthetic. This Lizard was more monstrous than ever, embracing his animalistic nature. Although he appeared in only a few episodes, this adaptation left a strong impact with its horror-focused approach. The Lizard's design was streamlined and fearsome, emphasizing his predatory instincts and reinforcing the darker tone of the series. 2008's The Spectacular Spider-Man brought a fresh take on the Lizard, appealing to a new generation. Here, Curt Connors was portrayed as a young and friendly scientist, working closely with Peter Parker. This show dives into Amazing Spider-Man 2012, brought Dr. Curt Connors, also known as the Lizard, to life in his first live-action appearance, played by Rhys Ifans. Unlike previous portrayals in animated series, this version of Dr. Connors has a compelling, tragic backstory woven into his transformation. Connors is depicted as a brilliant but troubled scientist, struggling with the loss of his arm and desperate to find a way to regenerate his missing limb. His groundbreaking research into cross-species genetics offers him a glimmer of hope, but it quickly leads him down a dark and dangerous path. Driven by ambition and personal frustration, Connors develops a serum derived from lizard DNA, hoping to use its regenerative properties to regrow his arm. When he tests it on himself, the serum does indeed regrow his limb. Initially, it seems like a miracle. But soon after, Connors begins to transform, becoming a hulking reptilian creature with superhuman strength and agility. This transformation reveals the double-edged nature of his scientific breakthrough, as Connors loses control and becomes the terrifying Lizard. In the film's climax, Spider-Man manages to stop Lizard and reverse the effects of the serum, bringing Dr. Connors back from his monstrous form. Connors' vulnerability in these final moments underscores the tragedy of his story. He was a man driven to dangerous lengths by his longing for wholeness, a reminder of how the pursuit of science, when unbalanced by ethics, can lead to unforeseen consequences. In Ultimate Spider-Man, also from 2012, the Lizard appeared with a more cartoonish and exaggerated design, fitting the show's younger and more comedic tone. Here, Connors is transformed into a larger, bulkier lizard, emphasizing his brute strength more than his tragic background. This version of the lizard was more straightforwardly villainous, with a design that was fun and dynamic, but lacked some of the tragic undertones of previous versions. Despite this, Ultimate Spider-Man brought the lizard into a new era of storytelling, making him accessible to younger fans. Marvel's Spider-Man animated series in 2017 introduced a new version of the lizard that stayed true to his classic green and scaly appearance. In this version, Curt Connors is a prominent scientist, and his transformation is portrayed as both monstrous and sympathetic. This lizard was powerful and intelligent, striking a balance between his animalistic nature and his scientific mind. His storyline explored his bond with Peter Parker and gave us a more modern take on his tragic story. In Spider-Man: No Way Home, Lizard returns to the big screen as one of the iconic villains from the multiverse, reprising Rhys Ifans' role from The Amazing Spider-Man. With updated CGI, Lizard looks even more ferocious, blending his classic reptilian design with sharper textures and intense expressions. He's less of a calculated villain and more a primal, unpredictable force, a wild card among the team of villains. Lizard's animalistic nature brings a unique dynamic to the final showdown, contrasting with the more human motivations of the other villains. Though he has fewer lines, his aggressive attacks and primal instincts make him a formidable opponent for the three Spider-Men, adding a dark reminder of the consequences of lost humanity. In No Way Home, Lizard's presence brings a nostalgic callback to the Amazing Spider-Man series, while adding fresh excitement to the film's multiverse mashup of heroes and villains.